Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, happy Tuesday. A little later in the show, we'll dive into the sit-down from Wisconsin with Vice President Kamala Harris and former Representative from Wyoming, Liz Cheney. That's right, they sat down together and have been campaigning together on the campaign trail for a little while now. I got to tell you, as a progressive, someone who is, and for years has been pushing for the Democratic Party to stick to their values, to adhere to their platform, to promote their platform as much as possible. It usually troubles me when the top of the ticket looks to the center-right to harvest for votes. It has. It's just always sort of troubled me because I believe that when you do that, you're also adjusting policy. And if we're being honest, we've seen the Democratic Party do that from time to time. I mean, the Clinton presidency was rife with leans to the center, overtures to the right. There's been capitulation. And listen, I'm not naive. I know that that's how Washington works. I said that as much when it comes to the topic of immigration. The right has been radical and intransigent on immigration for decades now. And because they don't care to work in a bipartisan fashion, instead choosing to say, the Democrats won't do anything about it, so it gets worse. When two outfielders stand in the outfield and there's a ball to be caught between the both of them, and one outfielder goes for the ball and comes up a little short and the other one doesn't move, the one that doesn't move can't complain about the effort of the one that at least tried, right? But that's kind of where we are in immigration. So my point is, I understand that you have to move to the center occasionally. And in this election, I tell those who are firmly to the left, this isn't the election. This isn't the election to punish the ticket for not being left-wing enough, progressive enough. Bernie Sanders is the linchpin of the progressive movement. You don't hear him holding his breath or even talking about holding his breath. Jill Stein, statistically irrelevant as she is she's just off on her own little eco trip. She couldn't even tell you how many people are in Congress when asked. I kind of want somebody who at least knows that basic civics question when asked. I'd like to know that the person occupying the White House actually knows that. That's just me. So I guess I'm saying in this case, whereas in most election cycles I might be concerned when I see my party or the top of my party looking to the center-right, this year, it is what it is. There is that existential threat to democracy that we have to combat, that we have to overcome. We can turn the page and deal with our partisanship after the fact. And surely, after the election is over with, I can just imagine that on day 2, Liz Cheney will go back to critiquing the way Kamala Harris cuts her steak. And any and every other thing that the presumed president does from then on going forward. And that's fine. It is what it is. That's the world we live in. Those are the cards we've been dealt. But first, Liz Cheney is putting America first. Country over party. I mean, literally the backdrop, every time they go to a campaign event, you see that on the backdrop, country over party. We will get to some of the audio from that sit down a little bit later in the show. First thing I really want to tackle, though, is the cancer that is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene is no different than J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, in the, well, I heard this, and this is obviously true, so I'm going to parrot it like crazy on social media to my millions of followers and let the chips fall where they may. Marjorie Taylor Greene heard a story from someone about Dominion voting machines changing votes. And raced to social media to say so. I mean, maybe she'll get sued. Dominion has said they're monitoring everyone's words and actions. And they got money from Fox News. They got a lot of money from Fox News. Maybe they'll get a lot of money from Marjorie Taylor Greene as well. She tweets, this happened in Whitfield County in my district, Georgia 14. We vote on Dominion voting machines. Then it printed out a paper ballot with our selection made on the machines. The voters' printed ballot had been changed from their selections made on the machine. Good thing they checked their paper ballot before turning it in. After several attempts of trying to change it to reflect their correct choices, they had to void the ballot and use a different machine. Please double check your printed ballot before you turn it in to make sure it has marked the candidates you voted for. 3 exclamation points. That's serious. So she shared a screen grab, I guess, of someone else's tweet that said, make sure you check your ballot after you print it. FYI to all my voting friends and family, a friend of mine, here we go, a friend of mine in Whitfield County yesterday voted, checked his selections, then printed it, checked the printed version, and it was not marked the same. 3 exclamation points. You know it's serious. Please really look at the printed ballot after completion. Very strange occurrence. After several attempts for correction, they voided that ballot and machine, and he had to revote on another machine. Please check your printed ballot. I mean, there's got to be 10 exclamation points. Very serious. So here's the story behind the story. Mark Nisi at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports on this, that election supervisor Shani Bryson was in the early voting room at the Whitfield County Courthouse last week when a middle-aged man claimed that a voting machine had, quote, flipped his vote. The voter said the voting machine changed his vote on a ballot question, not a presidential candidate. Election officials couldn't substantiate the allegations, and the voter filled out a new ballot without any further problems. There, that's it. That's the story. The voter said that the ballot question, I think it was one of those constitutional measures, there's 3 of them on the ballot, that the answer he gave somehow came out different. And they couldn't substantiate it, but said, you know what? We're going to throw this out. I hope they have a paper shredder there. Shred that one. Do it again. Mark Nisi reports, but the story spread with help from Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said voting machines made by Dominion voting systems were, quote, switching votes from Donald Trump. Shani Bryson said Monday that she's careful not to accuse voters of making mistakes or misstatements. Boy, you just don't want to do that. You know, it's almost like being in customer service. Customer's always right. But it's possible the voter made the wrong selection on the touchscreen. Georgia's ballot includes 3 statewide ballot questions, all dealing with taxes. He approved his second ballot and put it in the scanner, and he seemed very satisfied with the solution, said Bryson, who oversees elections in the North Georgia County with 64,000 registered voters. We don't want to point fingers at a specific voter. We're just here to help. God bless her. Among other claims, Trump supporters have said that the 2020 election was stolen because of voting machine errors, but vote flipping has never been found. No evidence of that. 3 vote counts showed that Trump lost to Joe Biden by about 12,000 votes. Greene promoted the allegation of voting machine problems to her pro-Trump audience on social media, and during an interview with Alex Jones, a conspiracy theorist who runs the InfoWars media platform.
Someone posted up that when they went to vote in Whitfield County here in Georgia's 14th district, now remember, we're a swing state, and we need everyone to vote in my district. And so they went to vote, and we have the Dominion machines. And you go through and you mark president, you mark, for Congress, that would be me. They marked Donald Trump, and they marked who they were voting for the rest of the way down their ballot on the machine. Then when they're finished, the machine prints their ballot, a paper copy, a printed copy, and each voter has to review that printed copy to make sure that it has selected the candidates that they want to vote for. And so when this voter printed their ballot and they looked, it had changed. It was not Donald Trump. It was not me. And it was not the other ones they had voted for.
Wrong.
It had switched.
Wrong.
And so they went up to one of the election workers and they said, here's the problem. The machine switched it and printed ballot.
Wrong.
I did not vote for these people.
Wrong.
So they had to start over, and they went through it several times, and it kept on making the same error. kept on switching the votes. And so this is something we're just starting to look into today, because I just found out about it this morning before I came on your show today. But we will be following up, and I'll be talking to election workers and officials here in the district and making sure that this happens, that these ballots are correct, because that's extremely concerning. It sounds similar to what we heard in 2020.
Things that were heard maybe by folks who buy into any conspiracy theory that comes to them that rationalizes what they perceive to be not rational, an election turnout, but were unsubstantiated. I mean, what happened is actually what is supposed to happen. You review your ballot. You're asked to do that. Review your ballot. You're asked to do that by the touchscreen, by the very machine, to review your ballot before submitting it. Gabriel Sterling from the Secretary of State's office tweets, "There's a reason we tell people to review their ballots. Humans make mistakes. They're called mistakes for a reason. Anyone claiming machines are flipping votes are lying or don't research. This issue is human user error. Always will be. Whitfield County handled it, and the voter voted." Even Marjorie Taylor Greene went back to social media. "I'd like to thank Whitfield County Election Board for the public transparency and dedicated hard work to election integrity. I'm 100% committed to representing the people of my district, blah, 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 and fighting alongside them to make sure our elections are secure and no votes are stolen. I've done this from day one, and I'll never stop." And then she gives instructions on how to vote. If you see something wrong, say something, report it. Don't sit on the sideline. Blah. Anyway, all that stuff happened, and the process continued to work. Shani Bryson, Whitfield County Elections, said out of 8,600 early voters in Whitfield County through Monday afternoon, no one else had complained about voting machine errors. The machines have been tested. There are checks and balances during voting. They all have to get us the result that everything turned out correctly, and it always does. Always, even in 2020. That's the inference I'm making. But you see how easy it is for a third-hand or second-hand story to come to the attention of a Marjorie Taylor Greene with her millions of followers on social media, for her to race to Alex Jones to go on his webcast. I mean, you heard all the things that she said wrong. I pointed them out, that were not correct. This was not a vote for the presidency. This was not a vote for her. It was a ballot measure. It was one of the 3 constitutional questions on the state ballot. One of them, just one. And it was corrected. But that did not stop her from going with misinformation onto social media, onto Alex Jones' show, and spread lies. They're going to watch so-called election integrity like a hawk, and we have to watch their reaction like a hawk as well. New polling to dive into when The Ron Show returns on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Head to RonShowATL.com if you would like to. For show notes, follow up on any past episodes that you'd like to listen to again or follow up on, or if you'd just like to share with your friends on your social media, that would be fantastic. You can also follow the show at RonShowATL. You can contribute to the show. I love it when somebody says, hey, let me get this guy an iced coffee. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. RonShowATL.com for that. I cannot believe. No, I can. I can absolutely believe. After, a decade or so of Donald Trump's presence in our political discourse, that we're talking about a dead golfing legend's penis. I can totally believe it. I mean, why not? Something has happened. There is a glitch in the Matrix. If you subscribe to the Matrix theory, that we're all living in some sort of virtual reality. We're all tethered into some sort of computer reanimation of what life is supposed to be. And if that is true, if we are just inside somebody's video game, there's something wrong with the machine. They need to Control-Alt-Delete, unplug, count to 60, and plug it back. Something needs to happen, because this sort of should not be talked about on the campaign trail.
Arnold Palmer was all man, and I say that in all due respect to women, and I love women.
Who cares?
But this guy, this is a guy that was all man. This man was strong and tough, and I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God.
Oh God.
That's unbelievable. I had to say it.
You didn't.
I had to say it.
You really didn't.
We have women that are highly sophisticated here, but they used to look at Arnold and say, man, but he was really something special. Arnold was something special. So I just want to tell you, you're very lucky, the people that live in Latrobe, and it's an honor for me to be here because of him. And he was actually he was a great man, and I don't think there would be golf to the extent that you have it today. It probably wouldn't be that way without the great Arnold Palmer. So enjoy it, everybody. Enjoy it.
Golf. Somehow we're grateful to Arnold Palmer because we still have golf. And oh, by the way, I mean, I know he thinks that was showing Arnold respect. Arnold's daughter really doesn't see it that way. With Abby Phillip last night, we have Peg Palmer-Wares.
And it's coming from a former president of the United States, someone who is running to be president again. Has anyone reached out to you, Donald Trump or his campaign, after he made those vulgar remarks about your father?
Of course not.
They probably have a long line of people to reach out to because it seems to be something he does. Again, he can say it's locker room talk. It's something that he seems to think is acceptable. In my father's world, it wouldn't be acceptable.
No, of course not. And understand when I say this, I'm gay, I get to say this. It's gay. Anyway, I don't know why I felt the need to even go. We're sitting here worried about mental fitness for the highest office in the land, and that makes discourse. That is what came up at a campaign rally in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, a swing state that Donald Trump desperately needs to win in order to stay out of prison and return to the Oval Office. New polling out, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution releasing some new polling that showed that Donald Trump has a slight edge over Kamala Harris, according to their most recent polling. Greg Bluestein reporting the Republican nominee has a lead of 47-43. Notice again, nobody has 50%. 47-43, that is only 90% when you add them all up. Just outside the poll's margin of error at 3.1 percentage points, though. But with 8% of likely voters indicating they're still undecided, who the hell are these people? The race could break either way as early voting enters its second week. The other candidate or candidates, by the way, only get 1%. Bluestein reporting among the most telling takeaways of the poll is the stability of the race. As both campaigns pour time and treasure into Georgia, Trump support remains virtually unchanged since the AJC's last poll in September. Harris dropped a fraction of a percentage point. The number of undecided voters has hardly budged. It's a really close race. Neither side has this in the bag, according to University of Georgia political scientist Trey Hood, who oversaw the poll. And that makes the next 2 weeks even more important. Bluestein writes, the poll suggests that Harris may still be struggling to woo black voters, the bulwark of Democratic coalition. About 3/4 of black voters say they'll vote for her, far behind the 88% that Joe Biden won in 2020 when he narrowly flipped Georgia. That doesn't mean those voters are gravitating toward Trump. 1 in 5 black voters are undecided, while only 8% say they will cast their ballot for Trump. It indicates that Harris' campaign, which has stepped up efforts to bolster her black support, should be more worried about apathy, the couch, than losing voters to the GOP. I've heard somebody say that before. They're battling not Trump, they're battling the couch. I don't know, I just found that interesting. There was another poll, by the way. Voto Latino did a poll here recently. In a tight presidential race, this is from the Georgia Recorder. I'll include both of these articles in the show notes at RonShowATL.com. Both campaigns have tried to court the Latino vote, one of the fastest growing voting blocs. A new poll released Monday by a civic engagement group, Voto Latino, found that Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris continues to grow her support with Latinos in critical battleground states. The poll by the firm GQR surveyed 2,000 Latinos registered to vote in the battleground states of Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, although not Georgia, from September 25th to October 2nd. Vice President Harris even outperformed President Joe Biden in several swing states compared to his 2020 presidential results, according to the poll. In August, Harris had the support of about 60% of Latino voters compared to GOP presidential nominee Donald Trump's 29%, according to the poll. Both candidates increased their support of that voting bloc in October, with Harris at 64%, Trump at 31%. The poll found that Harris' growth has come from young Latino voters aged 18 to 29. And here in Georgia, let me pivot to GeorgiaVotes.com, which, by the way, says we're only 6 percentage points off the 2020 pace. We've closed that gap another 3 percentage points just in a day. Of the non-voters, 15.6% of those who have voted so far early, they're non-voters. They did not vote in 2020. Of that 15.6%, 51.4%, my apologies, of those new voters who did not vote in 2020, more than half, 51.4%, are in the 18 to 29 age demographic. And of the folks who didn't vote in 2020 who are voting in 2024, we have 31.1% identifying as Hispanic. That leads white voters, black voters, Asian voters, who, by the way, are 27.9%. Think about that. You are looking at 59% of all new voters are Hispanic or Asian. On that note, Representative Dr. Michelle Au tweeting it is worthwhile for campaigns to reach out to AAPI and Hispanic voters. She's right. Back after this.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
I led off today's show sort of pointing out how in most election cycles it worries me when Democrats woo moderates. But hey, it got us Senator John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, who really is something of a moderate. I mean, he's not anything like Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema, who's not even a Democrat anymore. Wait, I don't think Manchin is either, is he? Anyway, it's not like John Fetterman's in any way like those two, but he's a moderate Democrat. And listen, in some parts of the country, that's what it takes. And because we have a presidential election system that insists that candidates win states and not votes, and we are looking at swing states that are mostly moderate. Look at the swing states: Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, Georgia, Michigan. Who am I leaving out? Those are all could go either way states and have been. They have swung not wildly, but they've swung from one way to the other. I would argue that Arizona is trending towards blue. Wisconsin has gone back and forth. Pennsylvania back and forth. Georgia trending purple. But anybody who's listened to this show day in and day out knows that I don't believe Georgia's a blue state. The shirts were nice after 2020. Oh yeah, we're rocking around wearing Georgia's a blue state shirt. Okay. It's not. It's a purplish red state teetering on dead center purple, but not quite there yet. I have pointed out many times that the reason Republicans lose statewide office seats, and I say statewide elections, not statewide offices, because they don't lose those. You notice that? They don't lose those. Constitutional offices in the state of Georgia, Democrats have nothing. We don't even have the state house. We don't have any of the legislative bodies. Gerrymandering has a lot to do with that. But I think the margin would be closer. I think it would be in play. But statewide offices, Georgia doesn't come close to winning those. Stacey Abrams was the closest in 2018. Republicans lose in Georgia Senate seats and presidential elections because of poor candidate choice. So yeah, anyway, I usually get a little worried when I'm, reading about the candidate or the party wooing moderates, going for those Reagan Republicans. They don't exist. They're just Republicans. Colleen Long, Chris Megarian at the Associated Press writes, Kamala Harris teamed up with Liz Cheney in 3 battleground states Monday to make a bipartisan appeal to Republicans who might be uneasy about Donald Trump, describing the former president as a malignant force that must be excised from American politics. This is a great point. In an election that's expected to be decided by thin margins, Democrats are trying to persuade enough people to cross the aisle to nudge Harris over the finish line. It's a strategy that goes against longtime political doctrine that suggests candidates must tend to their ideological base above all else. Democrats aren't always good at that. Sometimes to the detriment of reaching out to swing voters, but with Trump alienating some Republicans with his election denial and acting increasingly erratically on the campaign trail. Did the Associated Press point that out? Hey, we're finally starting to talk about Donald Trump's signs of dementia. We talked about that with Joe Biden for quite a while. on the campaign trail. Harris is betting there's a path to victory with college-educated suburban voters who have already been drifting toward the Democratic Party. I would say ... for now. Liz Cheney, a former congresswoman from Wyoming, said Harris would, quote, lead this country with a sincere heart. I'm going to give you some of the audio of that. In that, she says, we may not agree on every issue, but she's somebody you can trust. This is fascinating to watch for somebody who has followed politics since the 1980s and seen the drift to hyperpartisanship. It's just fascinating to watch. Anyway, let's get some of that audio up. And can we just start with the fact that a Kamala Harris sit down, the Democratic nominee for president, with Liz Cheney, former Republican congresswoman and daughter of Dick Cheney, Dick freaking Cheney, y'all. This was moderated by conservative radio host, conservative Milwaukee radio host, Charlie Sykes. Here he is.
Hey, and welcome to this production of The Odd Couple. Okay, and it really is odd. I never thought that I would be here.
For real.
You never thought that I would be here.
For real.
But that's because this is not a normal election.
Yep.
This is not an election between Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives. So that's why we're doing this, dogs and cats together in this strange moment. It's why we're having this conversation here in Brookfield, Wisconsin, crucial Waukesha County. But we're not going to be talking about a few things. We're not going to be talking about sharks and electrocutions. We are not going to be going through Tony Evers' 40-minute playlist and swaying to the music.
Oh my God.
We're not going to be talking about Jewish space lasers.
Thank you.
Or Arnold Palmer's putting game. That's the other event down the road.
Right.
The reason we're having this conversation, though, is that despite the clownishness, the stakes are so serious.
Right.
This is election, again, not about the normal divisions in American politics, but about things like decency and democracy, the rule of law, whether or not we're going to shred the Constitution, and whether or not America will continue to be a shining city on the hill to the rest of the world. I don't think our guests tonight need any introduction, so I won't spend some time, but I do want to say this. Political courage is vanishingly rare in our world today. And I know of very few people more courageous than Liz Cheney.
I mean, credit where it's due, right?
Liz Cheney has given up a lot, but she's also inspired a lot of us. And the thing about Liz Cheney to keep in mind is that Liz Cheney knows that January 6th was not a day of love. Mm-hmm. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Congresswoman Liz Cheney.
Applause,
and it is my great privilege and honor to introduce to you tonight someone who is here precisely because she believes we have to put country over party, the next President of the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris.
Again, y'all, conservative radio host Charlie Sykes just said that about the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. We live in weird times.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
And Vice President, welcome back to Wisconsin.
It is good to be back. You know, so Tony Evers, that's funny about his playlist. Is it really that long?
No.
Okay. Every time I land in Wisconsin, almost every time, Tony Evers, the governor, will meet me on the tarmac. And because I did live in Wisconsin when I was 5 years old, every time he will say, "Welcome home." So I do feel and have a connection to Wisconsin and feel a sense
Actually,
of
we all
connection.
have connections to Wisconsin, which makes this event, I think, so important with 15 days to go. So let's just dive right into all of this. There are actually undecided voters out there.
Yeah.
And there are undecided voters here.
Yeah.
People who have never voted for a Democrat, moderates, conservatives who've voted for people named Bush and Cheney and Ford and Reagan and Bob Dole.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a throwback, isn't it? But I guess the question is, what is your pitch to them? Why should they do something they've never done before why should they cross over party lines and vote for you?
Well, I start from the belief, based on a lived experience, that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us. I also know that you all are here spending time that you could be spending doing a number of other things with all of the obligations you each have. And you are here because we together love our country. We love our country. And we believe in the foundational principles that are at stake in this election. I believe that when we think about who we are as the American people, there is more we have in common than what separates us when we think about what is at stake in terms of our democracy, rule of law, the Constitution of the United States, national security, the standing of our country in the context of the world. All of that is at stake. And I will share with you, Charlie, when I was in the Senate for those 4 years that I was there, my favorite committee was the Senate Intelligence Committee, and I'm going to tell you why. We would walk into that meeting in a SCIF, which is a secure room. We'd have to leave our cell phones outside. The press, with all due respect, were not allowed in, no cameras. People would walk in, Democrats and Republicans, take off their suit jacket, roll up their sleeves, and we dispense with who was a Republican and who was a Democrat. We were all Americans. We were all in that room with one singular purpose: to concern ourselves as our highest priority with the security and well-being of the United States of America. I think those things are at stake in this election.
Congresswoman Cheney, you know how hard this is, though. You know how hard it is to break away from tribal loyalty, to do something you haven't done before. So I'd like you to address that as well. Lindsey Graham was on television yesterday saying, what are you, never Trump Republicans, what are you thinking of? How could you possibly do all of this?
Actually, let's go to that audio from Meet the Press on Sunday.
It was Joe Biden who got us out of Afghanistan that led to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It was Kamala Harris, the border czar, that opened up our border to 10 million illegal immigrants running wild, women getting raped and killed, terrorists residing in our backyard. It was their decision to stop energy production, making us more energy independent. It was their decision to abandon Israel at their time of need when it came to weapons.
Senator, the U.S. is making more energy than
I think these generals are wrong.
But they worked for Donald Trump.
You know what? I know,
they worked for former President Trump. These are former Trump administration
to every Republican
officials
supporting her. What the hell are you doing? You're supporting the most radical nominee in the history of American politics. The Green New Deal, Medicare for all. She was the last person in the room before Biden decided to withdraw from Afghanistan. She was the border czar. She cast the tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Reduction Act that gives you high prices. What are you doing? You're trying to convince me that Donald Trump's rhetoric is the danger to this country. The danger to this country is the policies of Biden and Harris. Her fingerprints are all over this disaster, and I can't take 4 more years of this crap.
All right.
When you support her, you're supporting 4 more years of garbage politics.
Senator, we got a lot more to get through, so let me keep
anyway, Liz Cheney.
There are a lot of people who are listening to us who may be disillusioned with what's happening with the Republican Party, but they're afraid of paying the price because there is a cost to all of that. So what do you say to those Americans?
Well, don't listen to Lindsey Graham, number one. It's good life advice, actually.
More of her response when the Ron Show returns here on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Again, we'll have that entire sit down so you can review it in the show notes when we post those later today at ronshowatl.com. Back after this. All right, final few minutes of today's Ron Show, and I'm not going to spend too much time. Well, there's way more audio to give you of this sit-down with Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris than I have time for. Let me just put it to you that way. But I think it's important to sort of set the table for just how important it is for rational Americans who are not nuts, who are not in the MAGA cult, who are not blinded by whatever it is that Trump blinds people with. Lindsey Graham among them. I don't understand how the same guy who was exasperated on the evening of January 6, 2021 and said, I'm out, I can't, no more, is the same guy who was just on Meet the Press Sunday exasperated that there dare be Republicans who don't want more of that abject show that we went through, not just for 4 years, but just that day. If you take all the other nuttiness away, the staring at the eclipse, the bleach in the crazy chloroquine treatments for COVID, the pitiful COVID response. How about the plan to withdraw from Afghanistan that was an abject failure that he had his fingerprints all over? I mean, you want to blame Biden for stuff, but like just completely absolve Donald Trump for his role as well. Lindsey Graham, what the hell are you thinking? Anyway, back to Liz Cheney's response to Lindsey's meltdown.
But what I say is that what undergirds everything that we are as a nation, everything that we are as a nation is the rule of law, and it's our Constitution. And when you look at what Donald Trump did after the last election, when you look at the cruelty that's involved in someone who watches an attack on the United States Capitol, an attack conducted by people in his name, and refuses for over 3 hours to tell the mob to leave. I mean, people just need to think about what that's depravity. He watched the attack happen, and people kept asking him, please tell the people to leave. And law enforcement officers were being brutally beaten, and the Capitol was being assaulted, and he would not tell people to leave for over 3 hours. That cruelty is the same cruelty that we see when he lies about the federal government's disaster response, when he puts people's lives at risk because he won't tell the truth. He's a man who's unfit to be the president of this good and honorable and great nation. And so I've spent a lot of time working before I was elected to Congress in countries around the world that weren't free, or where people were trying to achieve their freedom. And I know how fragile this can be, how fragile democracy can be. And so in this election, we have a choice. We have the choice of somebody in Vice President Harris who you know is going to uphold the rule of law. You know that she's going to lead this country with a sincere heart. You know that she is going to always be thinking about what is best for this nation. We might not agree on every issue, but she is somebody that you can trust and someone that our children can look up to. And I think it's so important for us to cast the vote for Vice President Harris this time around.
You know, Vice President, I was thinking about one of your social media posts recently where you go through all the things that Donald Trump has bailed out of, that he won't debate you, that he won't do interviews, that he's refusing to release certain information. And you asked an interesting question, what is he hiding?
Yeah.
So what in fact is he hiding?
Well, I wonder what is he hiding. I also wonder what his staff is trying to hide by preventing or suggesting he not debate me again, not do these interviews. It is the norm, as you know, that presidential nominees will do a 60 Minutes interview. He has refused to do that. He is pulling out of interviews left, right, and center. And I think that what we see about him in public, whether it be his rallies or, as you said, would it be called just a solo dance? I don't know that it has a.
I don't know that it has a name to it.
Dance is really generous.
Yes, what that was. I think it does lead us, and it should lead us to observe that he is increasingly unstable. But you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to the people who know him best, the people who worked with him in the White House, in the Oval Office, in the Situation Room. His former chief of staff, 2 former secretaries of defense, his secretaries of defense, his former national security advisor, and of course his former vice president. And they have each talked about, the chief of staff, that Donald Trump has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. Not only has that been said by a former chief of staff of the former president, but we know he has openly talked about his intention to terminate the Constitution of the United States. I have taken that oath 6 times as district attorney, twice, elected and reelected, as attorney general of the largest state in California, twice, as United States Senator, and actually now as vice president. And the Congresswoman and I have talked about that. That is an oath one must take seriously. It is a duty to defend and honor and uphold the Constitution of the United States. He has said he would terminate it. Anyone who wants to be president of the United States should never again be able to stand behind the seal of the President of the United States, having said they would terminate the Constitution of the United States. And again, most recently, the report is that the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a decorated general, said of Donald Trump that he is fascist to the core. These are the people who know him best, people who worked with him. And so, yes, we can talk about that moment on stage of the music and all that, but I think it's very important that we acknowledge, and I've said publicly, Donald Trump is an unserious man. And the consequences of him ever being president of the United States again are brutally serious. Brutally serious. I have now, as Vice President of the United States, met over 150 world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and kings. Many of them multiple times we are on a first-name basis. Most of them allies in connection with NATO, and I've met with them in connection with our standing rightly with Ukraine. The world is watching this election, and our allies are worried. Because the reality is that when we as the United States of America walk in these rooms around the world, we walk in chin up, shoulders back, with the earned and self-appointed authority to talk about the importance of democracy and rule of law. And being a role model, this is a room of role models, we know as a role model, people watch what you do to see if it matches up to what you say. One of my very real fears, Charlie, to be candid, is I hope that we as the American people fully understand how important America is to the world. I hope we really, really understand that. Because this is about what will happen to and with us as Americans, but it will impact people around the world.
I was on a podcast recently with another pundit who was saying that she was afraid that America was sleepwalking into authoritarianism, that American voters were not sufficiently alarmed. And as the Vice President just said, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff just said that Donald Trump was the most dangerous threat facing the country. Do Americans in this last 15 days, do they understand that, and what has to happen in the next 2 weeks for them to really understand the danger?
Yeah, I think that they think they do. And, you know, one of the things I remind people is that although not every Republican who is casting a vote for Vice President Harris will say publicly that they are, there's clearly, you know, a threat associated with that in some instances. But millions will. And they will do that for a whole range of reasons. But what you mentioned is so important. I mean, when I think about, the first time I ever voted was for Ronald Reagan. I've known presidents well, obviously, particularly I know a vice president well, in addition to Vice President Harris. And I watch how our presidents have operated. And even when there have been presidents that we have potentially disagreed with on issues, they've respected the Constitution. I mean, think about the 2000 election and how close that was, and what Vice President Gore did in his concession speech and in ensuring that we had the peaceful transfer of power. And so I would just urge people, again, you don't have to take my word for it, but look at what the people closest to Donald Trump are saying about him. Look at the testimony of the leaders of his Justice Department, the leaders of his campaign, the most senior officials in his White House. You know, they're the ones that told us everything that we know about his plan to overturn the last election, about what he did watching the attack from his dining room. We've never faced a threat like this before. And I think it's so important for people to realize this republic only survives if we protect it. And that means putting partisan politics aside and standing up for the Constitution and for what's right and loving our country more.
Show notes and more at ronshowatl.com. Back tomorrow night at 10 a.m. on America One Radio, 11 to midnight on Progressive Voices. Have a great day.